finished uni about a year and a half ago. I did a bachelor in philosophy at Vic, and then I decided to go overseas on a little OE. I chose to go to Nepal for something a bit different. The idea is that it's kind of once in a lifetime you get that one-off pass, that 1 year that you just get to go do whatever you want. And I wanted to go see like third world and completely different culture, Hindu culture. I was going to spend, I think, about 6 weeks in Nepal. That was pretty scary because I was going on my own, like first time travelling, didn't know anyone in any other part of the world. So I kind of landed there, I was like the greenest of green, I just had no idea what I was doing, and had this enormous pack, and I was the most obvious tourist ever. So I arrived there 6th of April, and was volunteering with an organisation called Global Volunteer Network, and they do volunteering all over the world, but they have a program in Nepal for fixing up these children's homes. So I was going to volunteer at one of the children's homes to paint it and spend a few days learning the language. And I wasn't actually where I was supposed to be doing my volunteering yet. This was supposed to be just the place for orientation. I was supposed to just learn a bit about the language, a bit about the culture, and kind of learn how people eat with one hand and the whole going to the toilet fiasco. And so the morning of the earthquake, I started painting just as usual, and I was up to the 2nd floor. I'd done most of the outside windowsills and climbed back in, and then managed to get down to the bottom level and go off and have a nap. And then only about 5 minutes into that, I remember I was sitting on the couch and I was on the phone to my mate trying to organise the Annapurna trek I was going to do a few weeks later, and then it just hit out of nowhere, and it started with this massive jolt, and I was like smashed against the side of the couch, and I was like, whoa, that was bigger than I'm used to. And it just built and built and built, and it was like, usually it gets to a threshold and stays there, and you're like, yeah, that's okay. But this just like surpassed any expectations I had, and all of a sudden, like, I could just see the ground moving, and I stood in that doorway and looked across at the main building that I'd just been painting, that I'd just been hanging out of the window of, and I just watched like the roof cave in, and all of the tiles and all of the bricks, just everything on the facade just came down, and you could just, it was like the loudest thing that's ever happened to me and the quietest thing at the same time, because it was like I could hear my own heartbeat, and I could just hear the kids from all over the compound screaming, and I knew most of them were in the building. One of the kids that I got really, really close with, Kim, he was like my little brother there. I saw him just bolt straight out the door. He must have just got up and ran, and I watched him carve through this like hail of bricks and facade coming down. All of a sudden I was like an authority figure for the first time in my life, and he had this big gash in his head, and there was blood down his face, and he had like big bruises, and it looked like his wrist was broken from covering up. And he just looked up at me, and I like clamped my hand over his head to stop it and just cuddled him in, and we just stood there and watched all of the kids that had been in the building. They were all looking across at me, and I remember this person screaming, and the way I remember it is I just remember them screaming and screaming and screaming, stay there, stay there. But then, like, when I think back, it has to have been me, because I'm the only one that speaks English. Because I just had to make that like split-second decision between, do I tell them to come and they run through the hailing bricks and get hurt and maybe killed, and then that's on me, or do I tell them to stay, and if the building comes down, then that's on me too. And so I had to make like the most important decision with no time to think about it. It was just gut instinct, and I told them all to stay. And thankfully, about a minute later, it all stopped and they bolted. bolted out, and we all gathered in the courtyard and just kind of stood there in shocked silence. So directly after the first earthquake, I had made that Facebook status where I was asking, well, I was telling people that I was alive and that the kids at my home were okay. And so many people in there expressed a desire to help if there was any way they could. They had said, if there's anything I could do, just let me know. If you need money, if you need us to send anything, how can we help? And when I got my phone alive again after about 4 or 5 days, because we had no power, I opened it up and there was this just absolute flood of messages. I had like 100 Facebook messages, like hundreds of notifications, all of these emails, and all of these people were saying like, how can we help, how can we help? So I had this idea to make a little fundraiser, and I could buy some blankets, some rice, maybe a tarpaulin or two for the nearby villages that didn't have any, but we had supplies where we were at the children's home. And so I made this page, uploaded some of the photos I had taken, and wrote this spiel about what I wanted to do. And so the idea was just that I would raise some money from friends and family, because I was right there in the middle of it all, and I could get 100% of money to the people, and I could give it to the people that needed it most. And I had my credit card with me, so they could just put it in my home bank. I could hit an ATM, get it straight out, so there would be no dillying around with the whole thing. I could do it straight away. And so I wrote this really big long description about what was going on, sent it, opened up the Facebook page, made it public, and invited all my friends, and then my phone died. And then a few days later, I went on and something like $4,000 or $5,000 had been put in there, and then we started buying supplies and like food, shelter, clothes, medicine. We just bought everything we could, and we would get them out to the most rural regions we could. We rolled up on the back of Hari's bike, and I remember I was snuggled up against him, and I had one arm holding myself on and the other arm on my phone, trying to video everything on the way past, just the destruction, so I could put it on the fundraiser. And we hauled out like tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of food, one after the other, stacked up. I think it was about 120 or so sacks of rice, and we just piled them all up outside, and we just kept coming, and we just loaded up literally tons of food outside the building. And I just sat down on top of the pile of rice and just looked out at everyone, and they were all just like staring in awe. All of these villagers just started crying and just ran up to me, were like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much, and started like helping what was left to bring out. And it just felt so good to be this like makeshift little grassroots homemade thing, and we were just completely winging it. After about 2 weeks, I was getting pretty shattered. I was like emotionally and physically just strung out. So we drove out for about 5 or 6 hours into the hills, and we found this little village called Badikhel in the middle of nowhere. And we walked past a church, and they told us that it was in service, and there were 25 kids in the building. And when the earthquake started, the priest, he said, don't go outside, God will save you. Like, take care and God will take care of you. Trust him, he'll take care of you. And he shut the doors and locked them all in. And then the building came down and killed every single kid in there, and he survived. And I remember hearing that and just being, I just didn't know what to say. Emotionally, I just couldn't handle it. I think after the earthquake, it was like fight or flight or freeze essentially. So the way I handled it was that I just froze up, because I knew that if I like emotionally processed what was happening and actually took it on, there's no way that I could get up the next day and do it all again. So I've been back now for 5 months, and since being back, I've been working with Bonnie Howland for Indigo and Iris, and with my friend Pat at the 1% Collective, and I've really wanted to get into the whole world of non-profit and helping people, and I just go into town every day and just do volunteer work for different organisations, which is awesome, and it's a great experience, and I love it, but I'm aiming to be able to make a living from doing it. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as I can pay the rent. The point is to be able to do something that you feel good about at the end of the day. I have mates that every single weekend they talk about how their week just meant nothing to them, and their job means nothing to them, and they're just unhappy about every single day of work that they do. And I came back from Nepal feeling like the best part of myself. I felt like the best version of myself I've ever been, and I wanted to keep that feeling. I wanted to keep that and be able to use that to be able to help other people and keep that feeling. And so the idea is to be able to keep that alive.